أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد الرسولين السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن زهر أسود الموجود السلام عليك وعلى الأرواح التي هلت بفنائك عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وباقي الليل والنهار يا أبا عبد الله لقد عظمت الرزية وجلت وعظمت المصيبة بك علينا وعلى جميع أهل الإسلام وجلت وعظمت مصيبتك في السماوات على جميع السماوات فلعن الله من أسست أساس الظلم والجور عليكم أهل البيت ولعن الله من ثبتعتكم عن مقامكم وأزالتكم عن مراتبكم التي رتبكم الله فيها ولعن الله من خذلتكم ولعن الله الممهدين لهم بالتمكين من قتالكم وليس إلى الله وعليكم بينهم من أشياء وأسبابهم وأوليائكم يا أبا عبد الله إني سلما لمن سالمكم وحربا لمن حاربكم إلى يوم القيامة ولعن الله آل زياد وآل مروان ولعن الله بني أمية قاتلا ولعن الله ابن مرجان ولعن الله عمر الحصان ولعن الله الشباب ولعن الله من السجد والجماعة المتنقبة ذلك الذي يتبع بين على المصابيح فأسأل الله لك أكرم مقامك وأكرم بك أن يرزقني سنة ذلك كما يرى الرسول من أهل بيت محمد صلى الله عليه وآله اللهم اجعلني منك وجيه بالحسين عليه السلام في الدنيا والآخرة يا أبا عبد الله إني أتقرب إلى الله وإلى رسوله وإلى أمير المؤمنين وإلى فاطمة وإلى حسن وإليك بموالاتك بالبراءة ممن قاتلك ونسل صبرك الحل بالبراءة ممن أسس أساسكم والجور عليكم وأبرأوا إلى الله وإلى رسوله من أسس أساس ذلك بنى عليه بنيانا وجرى في ظلمه وجوره عليكم وعلى أشياعكم فرجت إلى الله وإليكم منهم وتقربوا إلى الله ثم إليكم بموالاتكم وموالاة وليكم وبالبراءة من أعدائكم والناصرين لكم الحرب بالبراءة من أشياعهم وأتباعهم إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم وولي لمن والاكم وعلوب لمن عاداكم فأسأل الله الذي يكرمني بمعرفتكم ومعرفة أوليائكم ورزقني البراءة من أعدائكم أن يجعلني معكم في الدنيا والآخرة وأن يثبتني عندكم قدم صدق في الدنيا والآخرة وأسأله أن يبلغني المقام المحمود لكم عند الله وأن يرزقني سلب ثاركم مع إمام قدر ظاهر ناطق بالحق منكم وأسأل الله بحقكم وبشأن الذي لكم عنده أن يعطيني بمصابيبكم أفضل ما يعطي مصابا بمصيبتي مصيبة ما أعظمها وأعظم التي تحت الإسلام وفي جميع السماوات والأرض اللهم اجعلني في مقامي هذا ممن تنال من الصلوات والرحمة والمغفرة اللهم اجعل محياي محيا محمد وآل محمد ومماتي وممات محمد وآل محمد اللهم إن هذا يوم تباركت به بنو أمية وابن آدرة الأكبر العين من العين على لسانك ولسان النبي صلى الله عليه وآله في كل موطن وموقف وقف به النبي صلى الله عليه وآله اللهم لن أبا سفيان ومعاوية ويزيد بن معاوية عليهم منك لعنة أبد الآبدين هذا يوم الفرح في آل زياد وآل مروان برفعهم الحسين صلوات الله عليه اللهم فضاعف عليهم اللعن منك والعذاب الأليم اللهم إني أتقرب إليك في هذا اليوم في هذا وأيام حياتي بالبراءة منكم واللعنة عليهم وبالموالاة نبيك وآل نبيك عليهم وعليهم السلام اللهم لن أول ظالمة لحق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له إلى ذلك اللهم لعن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين عليه السلام وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت رأسه اللهم لعنهم جميعا السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله حوال الأرواح التي هلت بفنائك عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وباقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر لحد مني بزيارتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين اللهم خص أنت أول ظالم باللعن مني الأول ثم الثاني والثالث والرابع. اللهم عن يزيد خامسا، وعن عبيد الله بن زياد وابن مرجان وعمر بن سعد بن شيبة وعن أبي سفيان وعن زياد وعن مروان إلى يوم القيامة. سجود. اللهم لك الحمد وحمد الشاكرين لك على مصابهم، والحمد لله على عظيم رزيتي. اللهم ارزقني شفاء الحسين يوم الولود، ثبت لي غدا صدقا انك مع الحسين واصحاب الحسين الذين بذلوا حجهم دون الحسين عليه السلام في الدنيا والاخره. صلوات أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. عن جابر بن عبد الله الأنصاري عن فاطمة الزهراء عليه السلام بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله قال: سمعت فاطمة أنها كانت دخل علي أبي رسول الله في بعض الأيام فقال: السلام عليك يا فاطمة. فقلت: عليك السلام. قال: إني أجد في بدني ضعفا. فقلت له: أعيذك بالله يا أبتاه من الضعف. فقال: يا فاطمة ائتيني بالكساء اليماني فغطيني به. فأتيته بالكساء اليماني فغطيته به، وسرت أنظر إليه وإذا وجهه يتلألأ كأنه البدر في ليلة تمامه وكماله. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسن قد أكبر. وقال: السلام عليك يا أمة. فقلت: عليك السلام يا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال: يا أمة، إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت: نعم، إن جدك تحت الكساء. فأقبل الحسن نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا جدة يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أدخل معك تحت الكساء؟ فقال: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوضي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معه تحت الكساء. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسين عليه السلام قد أكبر. وقال: السلام عليك يا أمة. فقلت: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال لي: يا أمة، إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله. فقلت: نعم، إن جدك وأخاك تحت الكساء. فدنا الحسين نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا جدة. السلام عليك يا من اختاره الله. أتأذن لي أن أكون معكما تحت الكساء؟ وقال: وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا شافع أمتي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معهما تحت الكساء. فقال إن ذلك أبو الحسن علي بن أبي طالب. وقال: السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت: عليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. وقال: يا فاطمة، إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن عمي رسول الله. فقلت: نعم، ها هو مع ولديك تحت الكساء. أقبل علي نحو الكساء وقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكما تحت الكساء؟ فقال له: وعليك السلام يا أخي ويا وسيلي وخليفتي وصاحب لوائي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل علي تحت الكساء. ثم أتيت نحو الكساء وقلت: السلام عليك يا أبتاه يا رسول الله، أتأذن يحزنني أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء. وقال: وعليك السلام يا بنتي ويا بضعتي، قد أذنت لك. فدخلت تحت الكساء، ولما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء أخذ أبي رسول الله بطرفي الكساء وأومى بيده اليمنى إلى السماء وقال: اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وحامتي، لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي، يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم. أنا هرب لمن هاربهم، وسلم لمن سالمهم، وعدو لمن آذاهم، ومحب لمن أحبهم. إنهم مني وأنا منهم. واجعل ثرواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم، واذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. وقال له عز وجل: يا ملائكته ويا سكان سماواتي، إني ما خلقت سماء مبنيا ولا أرضا مضحيا ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيا ولا فلك يدور ولا بحر يجري ولا فلك يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء خمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. وقال أمين جبرائيل: يا ربي ومن تحت الكساء؟ وقال عز وجل: هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة، هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. وقال جبرائيل: يا ربي أتأذنني أن أهبط إلى الأرض ليكون معهما سادسا؟ وقال له عز وجل: نعم قد أذنت لك. فهبط الأمين جبرائيل وقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله. الذي الأعلى يقرئك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام، ويقول لك: وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيا ولا فلك يدور ولا بحر يجري ولا فلك يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم. وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم، فهل تأذنني يا رسول الله؟ وقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله: وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله، إنه قد أذنت لك. ودخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكسرى. وقال لأبي إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول: إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهرهم تطهيرا. وقال علي لأبي: يا رسول الله، أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله: والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا، ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض، وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا، إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. وقال علي عليه السلام: إذا والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. وقال أبي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله: يا علي، والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واستفاني بالرسالة نجيا، ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض، وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا، وفيهم مهموم إلا وفرج الله همه، ولا مهموم إلا وكشف الله همه، ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته. وقال علي عليه السلام: إذا والله فزنا وسعدنا، وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة
رب الكعبة. محمد وعلى محمد صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
صدا رہے گا حسین کا، صدا رہے گا حسین کا، یہ شور گریا یہ شور ماتم، سنی ہوئی داستان پہنم، ایک آہ بھر کر ابھر رہی ہے وہ کربلا کی صدائے پرغم، صدا رہے گا حسین کا. اٹھے جو ظلم و ستم کے جھونکے، سوال یہ تھا کہ کون روکے. حسین ابن علی کے در پر جمی ہوئی تھی نگاہ عالم، صدا رہے گا حسین کا غم. برا جو حد سے غرور باطل، طرف اٹھا پھر حسین کا دل. چلا حرم کو وطن سے لے کر دائے زینب بنا کے پرچم، صدا رہے گا حسین کا غم. اصول فکر و عمل کو مورا، یزیدیت کے فسوق کو توڑا، ہر ایک دیوار ظلم ڈھا کر بن گیا دی، بنا گیا دی کا قاسم محکم، صدا رہے گا حسین کا غم. نہ روک سکی ہے نہ روک سکے گی، صدائے مظلوم کیا رکے گی. ہر ایک درکن سے دل کے اپنے ابھر رہی ہے صدائے ماتم، صدا رہے گا حسین کا غم، صدا رہے گا حسین کا غم. محمد وعلی محمد صلوات.
Do it, bro.
Abbas, you want to recite something? No. After the bus, let's do bus by Abbas. You do Persian. You do Farsi.
Bro, come on, lock it. Yeah, I'll go recite something. Do it. Yeah. یہ پڑھے گا میں نہیں پڑھنے والا. Probably. Yes. I know.
So that's the guy in the first place. You think U.S. gonna win against Australia? Australia totally wrong.
Luis, yeah, that's just.
But against America, I think they're gonna beat America. America might be good.
Not today. We got. Come on, do it right now, bro.
Please.
I want to hear your voice. You've been teasing us for so long. Come on.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات. Request for Surah Fatiha for all Muslims, especially Muslim Rizvi, the main principal of MASOM. Al-Fatiha ma salawat. محمد وآل محمد صلوات. Yeah, recite Allah salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Due to some unforeseen circumstances, inshallah, Mulana will be coming in a little bit. He's running a little late. So before he comes, we might as well just go over some announcements. Inshallah, from June 26th until the 28th, we'll have respected scholar Brother Adil Makki. He will be at MASOM for English Majlis up here. Inshallah, again, like we have been going we said yesterday, we are in this Ashra-e-Awwal for these 10 days of Muharram. Our topic is the foundation of Islam and Iman. The Mulana, you all know, Sayyid Hassan Rizvi, which he is from Orlando. He has blessed us again with his presence. He was here last year. Inshallah, just a few more reminders. Please be respectful. Keep the noise to a minimum. Please also, inshallah, from now on we will be having Q&As. So throughout the Majlis, please think of questions if you want to ask, inshallah, note cards, or you can talk to him directly, and that will all be provided. Inshallah, for brothers and sisters, please, there are cameras, they are recording us with noise and voice, so please maintain hijab and be respectful and just be mindful of what you're doing at MASOM. And inshallah, if any of the brothers would like to recite anything from Tilawat, Ashra, Hadith, Kisa, Marsiya, Sulsan, Noha, please, they can let me know, and inshallah, we'll schedule you so everyone can get a chance to do more stuff from Allah. Muhammad wa Muhammad salawat.
Should have spoken word. Huh? Should have spoken word. Oh, you haven't? Yeah.
You just
No. New Jersey is Orlando, like CSI. No, that thing. No, do spoken word actually. I don't have any. Do you have anything? Did you have that was like Imam Ali. And that was like a Harsa. Nuri Sardar. I look at Maj. Muhammad Abbas Jafar. He's Persian. Bro, I just did it right. What are you gonna answer?
that's a good one. No, right there, that's community right there. Community.
It's pretty short.
He brings me tea every day.
I've been the energy. So that's
Only if only we should call it Yazmi. So Shaheen. No, we already made sure that me and Adil have the same socks.
conference is what I'm going to. Huh? Bismillah. 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 No, it's fake nowadays, bro. It's fake now.
Just wear topi. That's what they do these days. There's a
wear a beanie. Just wear a beanie.
Oi, oi.
Pardon?
Bro, no, stop talking.
Huh?
You're in the call, bro.
What happened?
I know it's from I'm gonna make it tonight, but I'm not gonna tell you. That's one.
कुछ भी पढ़ लो तो हमारी आवाज कैसे चाहिए
There's one too much in there, but there's one too much.
you wanna
Where's Zen when you need this?
He's like,
Oh yeah, I know,
you wanna do something? Huh? यहाँ से वो sister side उस तरफ है
Yasha is there.
Can you call them and tell them?
The voting is just crazy.
यशा बेटा
Because someone's
यशा है नहीं है
It's a thermostat. Just lower it. You want to do it then?
फोन करो यशा को
This phone. Why not?
That's like 2 sentences. I don't really care, bro. I don't know how to. I don't know what that means. Confidence? No, confidence still have, but I don't know. But that's not confidence. I don't know.
नीचे
Yo, bring more to Yeah, he can probably do some. He can probably do some.
He
actually does recite, you know? Yeah,
यहाँ पर
he's on the call but he's on the thing.
इधर है
I'll switch. No. I was talking to him 10 minutes.
थर्मोस्टेट का मोहम्मद यशा को बोला यशा को बता दो कहां
I think उस तरफ कहीं है पता नहीं. You know what the thermostat is? To lower, like, can you lower it, please? Thank you.
I like it. Why say like that?
خواتين مؤسسات والله
You want to say that? You want to say something? I was just going to shoot back. I'm not saying it for anything crazy. What's ChatGPT saying? How's it? Looks pretty good. Huh? I actually did. I put like 1.5 hours. I swear.
Come on. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
Ya Fatima, Ya Fatima, rida mein chupa lo Hussain ko. Ya Fatima, rida mein chupa lo Hussain ko. मक्तल में गिर रहा है मक्तल में गिर रहा है संभालो हुसैन को या फातिमा रिदा में छुपा लो हुसैन को
بے وست ہے غریب کے پہلو میں برچیاں، تم کو بھی اٹھنے دیتی نہیں ٹوٹی پسلیاں، لے کر علی کا نام، لے کر علی کا نام اٹھا لو حسین کو، یا فاطمہ رضا میں چھپا لو حسین کو، دیوار و در کے بیچ جو ارمان رہ گئے، رکھی ہوئی تھے دل میں جو محسن کے واسطے، وہ لوریاں بھی وہ لوریاں بھی آج سنا لو حسین کو، یا فاطمہ رضا میں چھپا لو حسین کو، 16 پہر کی پیاس ہے اور ہے لبوں پہ دام، اور محمد و آل محمد صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد، 16 پہر کی پیاس ہے اور ہے لبوں پہ دام، دیکھ کر غریب بیٹے کو عباس کی قسم، پانی اگر ملے پانی اگر ملے تو پلا لو حسین کو، یا فاطمہ رضا میں چھپا لو حسین کو، شاہ کی غریب بیٹی کے ارمان کی طرح بولی میں لے کے تیسری شعبان کی طرح، کچھ دیر ہو سکے کچھ دیر ہو سکے تو سنا لو حسین کو، یا فاطمہ رضا میں چھپا لو حسین کو، اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد.
MashaAllah.
With the loud salawat, please help me to invite Mulana Sayyid Hassan Rizvi to the member. By Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين بالقاسم المصطفى محمد ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد صلوات محمد ومحمد مؤمنين مؤمنات brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair for your patience and apologies for running a bit late. Last night we started to recap some of the things that we had talked about previously last year regarding the concept of identity, Muslim identity, the difference between a Muslim and a mu'min, and to summarize it, to make it really simple, a Muslim talks, but a mu'min walks. That's it. A mu'min is supposed to back up these things that they believe in. Right? It's very easy for us to claim that we believe in these things and will follow. We would have protected the Imam if we were there when the 12th Imam returns. I'll do this for him, this and that. You know, talk is cheap. A mu'min can actually back up these things. And they don't have to wait for the zuhur of the Imam. They don't have to wait for some grandiose, action to happen. They live their lives constantly in the state of Imam. That every single thing that is ordered, recommended for them to do, they're living their life in that way, according to the teachings of Islam and the recommendations of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Now, we ended last night with this analogy that we had given last year too about Superman and identity, and how it relates to the loss of identity. So I think because we covered a lot of that last year, I don't want to go through all of it again. I know there were some points we didn't finish last night. I'm going to leave it aside for now. I'm going to go into a slightly different topic for tonight. If there are some specific questions or connections that you want made, maybe ask me afterwards or some other night, we can talk about it then. There's a few things that we're continuing from last night that we want to try to discuss and solve over these next few nights, inshallah. We want to be able to have a sense of Iman that we have pride in, right? That we are proud of and that our Imam is proud of as well too. We obviously know that there are Muslims who are claiming a status that is unbefitting of them. Right? People think that they are better than they actually are. We know that Islamic history is full of betrayal. Right? One of the reasons that we are constantly remembering Karbala is not just to remember the fada'il and the virtues of the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and his companions, but also to understand the enemies or those who thought they were friends of the Imam and then became enemies, right? Khiyanat and betrayal. These are all things that we're supposed to be reflecting on for ourselves. So we know it's possible. Maybe we're not looking enough internally to realize that, it is possible that maybe, God forbid, that I could betray my Imam too when he returns. Is there going to be a way for me to figure that out? Is there some sort of test that I can figure out whether I have a strong Muslim or Mu'min identity? Is there a way that I can determine, based on Islamic history, where other people tested in a certain way? Is there a certain formula? Or as we say, is there a sunnah of Allah, or sunnah of Allah? Is there something that Allah has shown over and over again? There's a system in place. If you follow through on this system, you will know very clearly, you'll have yaqeen, itminan, this peace of mind and certainty of whether you're ready for, spiritual growth. You're ready for your Imam to return and serve that Imam. So that's what I wanted to discuss, inshallah. And all of it revolves, interestingly, around the concept that we all know and love called bid'ah. So let me explain a bit. If you can recite salawat ala Muhammad wa Now, this word wilayah is obviously Shia's favorite word, right? Wilayah of the Ahlul Bayt. Even though, right, you always remember the wilayah of the Ahlul Bayt. Well, that wilayah of the Ahlul Bayt, where does that stem from? That Wilayah of the Ahlul Bayt is because of the appointment through the wasila of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, right? Sometimes, I mean, he's part of the Ahlul Bayt obviously, but sometimes we think of the Ahlul Bayt as kind of the imams. We sometimes put Rasulullah in a different category, which is kind of correct, kind of not. But the reason why we have this qadiyah and everything is because of the appointment that was given right through Rasulullah. But even that appointment, that wilayah that he had, that was given to the imams, even that is not his own anymore. As he was asked on Rizvi, he said, hold on, where is this appointment coming from? He says, look, this is not my decision. I'm not picking Ali because he's my, my cousin or my son-in-law. No, it's because this appointment's coming from Allah. That's where wilayah stems from. Right? One of Allah's names is Al-Wali. So this concept of wilayah is a lot bigger than you and I might imagine as Shias. It starts with Allah having this wilayah, which we call authority, or control, or power, whatever you want to translate it as. With his power and authority, he designates some of this to his Anbiya Mursaleen, the prophets, and then that continues on, because we don't believe that guidance stops, right? It always continues, at least us Shias do. That guidance continues with the Imams, right? So this is one aspect of wilayah. But even there, wilayah is not just about a bunch of powers or authority or control that somebody's given. This idea of wilayah is even larger than that. Right? Even amongst like the Sufis and the Urafa, they have books and books written and poetry written about what this concept of wilayah actually means. So I don't want to go through all the different concepts that requires its own separate ashra, to be honest. But there's one concept, one maybe hidden idea that will show us how wilayah really should be affecting each and every part of our lives, especially given the topic that we want to talk about tonight. So we want to talk about how wilayah is part of this educational system of Islam. Right? Islam is not just here to tell us this is how you pray, this is how you fast, read this book, eat this food, don't eat this food, don't drink this, and that's it, we're done. No, Islam, as we all hopefully believe or like to say, is a complete way of life. Every single thing that I need for my life is going to be told to me by Allah. Whether he says that you have to do this, it's wajib, you cannot do this, it's haram, or, okay, this is recommended, you can leave it if you want, but it's recommended, it's better for your soul if you do it. Or there's something makruh, which is, well, you could do it if you want, but it's not really great for your soul and your spiritual journey if you do that. And then Allah will also tell us that, look, there are some things which are mubah. It doesn't matter if you do it or not. Right? You do it, fine. If you don't, it doesn't matter. So that's a basic categorization there. But beyond these things that the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt have mentioned, what about things like, sometimes we talk about medicine. Is there an Islamic medicine? Right? Does something like that exist? When we talk about geometry, engineering, all these other sciences and disciplines, is there a quote-unquote Islamic version of that? There's a debate amongst our ulama of how far it goes. One of the opinions is that yes, because all knowledge obviously stems and comes from Allah, all reality obviously belongs to Him, then all purest, most complete forms of knowledge also have to be defined by Allah in the Quran and Hadith in some degree as well too. Right? So it's one of the opinions that's there. That also means there's a such thing called Islamic education. Now, there's a difference between Islamic education and Muslim education. Let me first distinguish that. If you have a school or a building where Muslims are being taught, you can call that Muslim education. If the method that's used to teach people is an Islamic methodology, then that would be called an Islamic school. I have to give another example to make that clear. Okay, what's the ruling on gambling in Islam? Haram. This is not a trick question, right? It's haram, right? Okay, good. I want to make sure we're on the same page, right? Right. So, is it allowed for a Muslim, for example, to open up a casino? No. Another clear one. There's no trick questions, at least right now. Is it possible for somebody, whether Muslim or non-Muslim, to say, I'm opening up a casino for Muslims? Is that possible? Sounds like it's not, but I'm going to prove to you that it actually is possible. A Muslim casino is actually possible. Why? Okay, yes, the gambling is going to be haram, of course. But let's say they say, look, the food that's going to be served there is all halal. At all the salah times, we're going to turn off all the machines. There's a separate salah, namaz room, and people can go and pray if they want to go to. There's no music playing, there's only a Quran playing the whole time. Now, this sounds hilarious to you, but there's probably Muslims who would probably go and do something like that. They would engage in that. So it's designed for Muslims, meaning people who have some level of practice, not fully, some level of practice they feel comfortable. I'm giving that extreme example because I don't want to give, there are clearer examples of this. I want to say it out loud in case there are people who might be performing some of these other types of actions, right? Maybe another example would be like a Muslim concert, right? Is you have whatever, a DJ or a singer or whatever, but it's designed for Muslims, right? Maybe you can see people there in hijab as well too. Although I heard at some of these concerts, women take off their hijab and they work with the singer and stuff. So people try to design this up to feel comfortable for Muslims, but is it Islamic? No, right? So that's the distinction. You can make it comfortable for people who identify as Muslims, who think that their identity is Islam, they're Muslims, and make some part of it feel Muslim and Islamic, but it's not really fully Islamic, right? That's the distinction. So a school, you can have Muslim teachers, you can have Muslim students, but what if the things they're teaching there are against Islam? Then that would be un-Islamic. Or what if the method that they use to teach is also un-Islamic? Then that would obviously make it a non-Islamic school. So an Islamic methodology, that's what defines whether something is Islamic or not. Hopefully that's clear for us. So now, I'm going to obviously tie all this together. We're trying to show that Widayah is a central pillar for an Islamic educational system. Right? That's what we want to try to establish. So how do we want to do that? First, let's look at the outline for any educational system that exists first. It's going to sound really simple when we say this out loud, but I want to make sure we're on the same page. Okay. Any sort of education, whether you go to a seminar or workshop, whether you're in grade school, whether you're in college, every place where education takes place, they follow the same sort of three phases, right? The instructor comes in, when they walk in that first day of class or that beginning of the seminar or workshop, do they just start teaching you right away? They just walk in and start writing on the board and start teaching? Nobody does that. What is typically the first thing that they'll do? Excellent, right? An introduction. They come in, they introduce themselves, they introduce the topic or the course, maybe the curriculum, the method that's going to be used, the tools that you use in the class or the workshop, whatever it is. So that first phase is always some sort of introduction, right? That's what happens first and foremost. Maybe they'll mention the goals of the course, that after you finish this class, this is what's going to happen. This is what should happen. The purpose. This is how it should or should not change your life or help you when you go out into the workforce. So that's the first phase. Now, once that first phase is done, then you can finally now go ahead and begin the instruction. Right? So now the teacher or the professor, or whatever, will now go and teach you what they have to teach. All the stuff we introduce you to, okay, here you go. Here's the books. Right now we're going to read them. Here are all the problems that are discussed in this field. So I'll introduce you to these problems. And then obviously these problems need to be solved. Now, if I'm just joining this class, this is new to me, am I going to know how to solve the problems? No, that's the whole point of taking the class. The teacher knows this too, so they offer up the problems and they say, okay, well, you don't know the solutions, so I have to show you what the solutions are. So I give you the problems, we'll discuss a little bit, then I show you the tools to use, the method that you use, so that you can learn how to solve this, but you're not alone. I'm with you, I'll take your hand and I'll show you how you solve these problems one by one. Right? So you do all of that. So the teacher is present during the whole time. So that's obviously the bulk of any sort of instruction, is that phase where you're learning to solve these problems with the teacher's presence. Then the final phase comes. Right? You've done the instruction. Now, what is obviously going to be the end of any real educational institution? Exam. Right? Now you got to be tested. You were introduced to it, you got instructed. Well, now let's see if you've actually met the goals and met the purpose of this course or class. Did you learn or not? Did you understand the tools, the methods, and all these things? So what happens? The same problems that were discussed during the teaching phase are now brought to you again. Okay? The same problems that you already went through, here you go. It's here again. But what's the only difference over here? In the teaching phase, the teacher's present. In the exam phase, the teacher's absent. They might be proctoring the exam, but they're not there taking your hand, showing you how to solve it. The idea is, you don't need me as a teacher anymore. I've given you the tools, you have to solve this on your own. If you can solve it on your own, or if you pass it, then basically you have kind of maybe two options. One option is now you're kind of done with this education, you move on to the next phase of your life, whether it's work or graduation, whatever. Or the other option is what? I finished this course, so now I get to go to the next course. I finish Algebra 1, I go to Algebra 2, for example. Or if you finish Cap 1, then you go to Calculus 2, which is worst course I ever took in my life, right? The most difficult thing. I don't know what the point of it is, to be honest, but killed me in college. So that's the idea. Is our life is just filled with these phases. We're introduced to something, we're taught something, we get tested, and if we pass it, then we go on to the next part, right? Whether it's the next course, the next grade, from bachelor's to master's to PhD, whatever it is. Or even when people take, after they're done with all their education, people train for certificates and skill sets. Even there, right? Same thing. Introduced, taught, you pass. Okay, you want to go for the next level, the next course, the next certificate. Go ahead. That's how any educational system works. Again, obviously, we all know this. We probably never thought about it in this detail, never said it out loud. But I want to keep this framework in our mind because I want to now tie in this concept of wilayah after salawat al Muhammad. This same pattern of education, this same pattern was implemented by the Ahlul Bayt writings. The same exact pattern. Now, there's two ways we could try to establish this point. One is going into the life of each MASOM and say, look, this is how they introduced and they taught and then they tested. We could try to do it like that. It's going to be very tough to find evidence like that, to be honest. It's probably not going to work. I'm not saying impossible, but it probably won't work. Some people, what they do is they try to take each and every individual imam almost like they're in a vacuum, right? Especially now in Muharram, what we end up doing is we take Imam Hassan and we discuss him in a vacuum, as if nothing else happened before him and nothing else happened after him. And of course, we're not talking about any other imam, we understand why we're focusing on him, but it sometimes gives us this sort of Islamic tunnel vision. We get stuck looking at Karbala only, and we forget that there's a lot of other Islamic history that has to be looked at too. You see sometimes either speakers or even us general lay people, we make the mistake of thinking everything needs to be examined through this lens and that's it. Well, no, methodologies will vary depending on what time it is. We all know very famously the principle is that you take any imam, you put him in the place of any other imam, they would have performed the exact same actions, right? That they're one nur, the same principles exist within them, and they just do whatever Allah is pleased with. That's how they operate. It's the same basic principles, but in every single time, every single phase, depending on the people around them, how many supporters they have, how many enemies they have, how intelligent their supporters are, how intelligent the enemies are, their tactics change constantly. So there's been a different theory that's been discussed by our ulama. Say, look, don't just take each imam in a vacuum and discuss them and then stop. Don't even take a few of these imams, because sometimes we'll say, okay, well, we discuss Imam Hussein alayhi salam by looking at the sunnah of Imam Hassan alayhi salam with Muawiyah and how it led up to Karbala. Okay, that's good too. You're expanding a little bit more. That's good. You get some context and some history. And we say, well, the treaty of Imam Hassan alayhi salam was possible because of Imam Ali alayhi salam. So people tie everything together, and all this was because of Saqifa. And you go back to Khadir, right? That's how this history is all tied together. So people try to do this, but still, that's still a very limited way of doing it. So what you see some ulama doing is say, look, and this was, let's say, popularized in recent history by Shaykh Khamenei, saying that instead of looking at them as individuals, take them as one single individual. Right? So he has this famous book, I'm sure any of you have heard of it. What is it called? Do you guys know? The 250-year-old person, right? It's on the a 200 or the 250-year-old person. So his analysis is that look at all of the imams, look at all the Ahlul Bayt as one single individual working towards one goal, towards the end, right? Establishing, right, this utopian society that will come with the Imam of the time, Imam al-Mahdi, Ajjallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif. So that's how he analyzes it. Other ulama will do the same thing. So we want to do something very similar. It's kind of a mix and match of all these different approaches. We're not going to look at all the imams as one, but instead what we're going to do is divide them up also into phases. 3 equal phases, just like we talked about the 3 educational phases. Okay, now this is simple math, again, not a trick question. We got 12 imams, right? Last time I checked, 12 imams. 3 equal phases, so how many imams per phase? 4, there we go, okay, good. Somebody's been paying attention in division class. All right. So, first, second, third, and fourth imam, they're part of the first phase. So what is that phase? What was that first phase of education? Introduction. When we think about the first, second, third, and fourth imam, even right now, if you, I don't know how many of us are familiar with all the narrations of the imams, but But generally speaking, do we hear narrations about ahkam and rulings from those imams? Not really. Not impossible, but usually we don't get our ahkam and our fiqh from that. What do we see? We see an introduction to Islam. We see a reintroduction to Islam for being accurate, and I'll explain that in a few minutes why it's a reintroduction. Is that they have to introduce people to Allah and to Tawheed, right? Because they forgot about what Tawheed really is. They have to reintroduce people to the personality of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because they had forgotten the personality of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They had to introduce themselves as being the wasi, the awsiya, the wali, the awliya of Allah and of Rasulullah, because people clearly had forgotten it after Kabir and Saqifa. So they're just back in the introductory phase. That's what they're trying to do. That's where you see all these various speeches and khutbahs that are given is, don't you know who we are? Don't you know who our ancestors are? Don't you know the position? Don't you remember this and this and this? They're trying to jog people's memories because they had clearly forgotten or they had ignored something. You don't see too much instruction happening at that phase. Why? Same way, a teacher's not going to just walk in and start teaching. If they had come and just started to try to teach the ummah at large, do you think that they would have accepted everything they said? Clearly they didn't. Even when they did try to instruct them, whether it was Imam Ali, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, Imam Sajjad, alayhi salam, how many people actually listened to them? Okay, you might say, okay, but Imam Ali alayhi salam had khilafah. Well, unfortunately, how strong was it khilafah? Constantly, these people, you look at Nahjul Balagha, how much he has to, call out and criticize his own soldiers, his own people. Look at the letters that he's saying. He said, one of the letters I'm paraphrasing, he says, he calls the people Ashra-e-Awwal. He says, you're not even men. You're pretend. You're fake men. You're not real men. He said, I want to go and fight Muharram for what he's doing, so I'm calling you to fight. Let's go fight. You come and complain to me. This is what Imam Ali says in Ashra-e-Awwal, right, to his own people. He says, when I tell you let's go to war, you complain to me that it's too hot in the summer. Let's wait till winter. He says, so I listen to you. I wait until the winter. And then winter comes and I say, now let's go fight Muharram. You complain, it's too cold. I can't fight. I wait till the weather gets better. I come back to you and say, let's go fight. You say, well, we shouldn't fight between Muslims. He said, you are not real followers. You are not real soldiers. You're not real Muslims. You are fake men. That's how he describes it. This is the loneliness that our Mullah faced at that time. So what would be instructions if people couldn't follow the basic order of their imam and their khalifa at that time? And this is what we see in that first phase of these imams. That's what's happening. They need to reintroduce them to all these basic principles. So what? They can literally pass the ball to the next phase, the next set of imams, the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. So you see, this is how it tries to culminate in Karbala, reawakening the consciousness of the people. Now we jump to the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. Now, what do we think normally when we hear about these personalities, especially the 5th and 6th? What comes to our mind? Scholarship, education, right? We usually associate it with Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, but he wouldn't have been able to do it if it wasn't for his father, Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. His name literally, Baqir, is one who splits. The full name is Baqir al-Ulum. And he's splitting and opening up all these knowledges and sciences for everybody else. That way was paved because of his father, his grandfather, and his forefathers. That's how this was allowed to happen. Now that people were awakened to this, now we can begin teaching them. Let's teach you about Quran. Let's teach you about usul al-fiqh and aqaid and all these other concepts. Because you have some semblance of tawheed and nabuwah and wilayah now, so now we can actually teach you, because now you actually trust us. So you'll see a lot of riwayat about ahkam and fiqh and Quran and all these things are from the 5th, 6th, and yes, the 7th and the 8th as well. But especially the 5th and 6th. Because now what? They can instruct, they can teach. You hear all these riwayat and all these historical reports about how, these major Sunni scholars, they were learning from our imams. How much do the contemporary Sunni scholars give them credit? Not too much, unfortunately. But that's who they learn from, or at least a good amount of the time. So Islam, if it wasn't for that instructive phase from our imams, would not have existed. Now, we could also say that instruction phase was impossible unless those first 4 imams didn't pave the way for them as well. So now we're kind of looking at it kind of holistically there too. They're saying that now that you have set up and you've established that there's a system of wilayah, you have these teachers, you're taking the instructions from them. Now you've learned some basic concepts. Okay, well now we can move on to the final phase. Now we can move on to the 9th, 10th, and 11th, and 12th Imams. Now, what is that phase highlighted by? What is it marked by? The instruction was done. The introduction was done. Then the instruction and teaching was done by the teachers with them present. So now what happens during the exam? Now the teachers are not going to be present. What do we call that? When someone's not present, we call that ghaiba. This is, and you might say, hold on, ghaiba is only for the 12th Imam. So you might think that because that's the only term that we use. Yes, the biggest, most prominent types of ghaiba and hiddenness happen in the ghaiba al-sughra and obviously the ghaiba al-kubra of the 12th Imam. But if anybody, and I encourage everybody if you can, try to read history of the Imams, please. Not just from the minbar, actually read history books. Right? We have enough translations now where it should be possible. Read these details. For all practical purposes, the 9th, 10th, and 11th Imam were pretty much in ghaiba as well too. Do you think that the Shias had access to their Imams? No, they didn't. Not readily, ready access. Let me share so one story from the time of our 11th Imam, Imam al-Askari alayhi salatu wasalam. Just a reminder, you probably have already heard these things in Majlis and programs before. Was the Imam physically there? Yes. But we know those Imams, those last Imams were almost always under house arrest, being taken from their families, taken from their homes, moved from jail to prison, and over here under the watch of the Zalimin, the so-called Khulafa of those times, of the Abbasids. The 11th Imam's time was one of the most difficult times. People always ask, and maybe you'll recall this, when we commemorate the Shahada of the 11th Imam. Right? The Khatib, the Zakir, the Adam who's reciting the Musibah, there's usually not much that they say about the Shahada of the 11th Imam. There's very little they might say. And then they might mention generally the idea of poison and something like that, and that's it. And then typically the usual format they have for the Masai is that they mention maybe one line vaguely, and then they jump in and talk about Karbala. That's usually what they do. This is normal. What happened once is after one of these majalis, somebody came up to me and said, look, there's nothing wrong, obviously. Like, we always want to hear about the tragedy of Karbala. There's no greater musibah, we get that. Say, but I don't understand. Say, why are you talking about Karbala more than the Shahada of the 11th Imam himself? Like, that doesn't make sense. So I get the connection, you can connect with any Imam, I understand that. But shouldn't you have spent more time talking about the 11th Imam Shahada and more of the details, etc.? I had to tell them what any of our teachers had told us. You show us the details. You show us anybody who knows what happened to the 11th Imam in his final moments, and we can tell them. But people were kept away. How much do we actually know about what happened in his life? Shahada is one thing. Throughout his life, how many details do we actually have? There's the same 2 or 3 stories that we end up hearing about dealings with the Christians, and this debate, and this mu'jiza, and miracle, and that's pretty much it. Why? Because nobody was there to report anything. Or if things were reported, those people were killed, or they were tortured, or their books were burnt and tossed away. For all practical purposes, this is a ghaiba. I'll give you, again, one very famous story that's told, and how sad it is too. Not everybody had the tawfiq to be able to see their imam. Some people did, not everybody did. So one individual had come to Muharram, and they had wanted to meet Imam al-Askari. So they met with one of the other Shias, local Shias. They said, I really want to. He said, look, the Imam doesn't really come out very often. It's probably not going to happen, so don't get your hopes up. So these 2 companions now, they're walking right in the street. And then all of a sudden, Imam al-Askari is seen walking in the street. And the one companion who knew him from before, who knew what he looked like, he said, guess what? That is our Imam. That's our Imam right there. So now the second companion is excited. He's like, I'm going to go say salam. I'm going to ask him this. I'm going to go talk to him. Give my bay'ah. He's thinking about all these things. He begins to try to go and run towards the Imam. And then before he even is able to even move, according to the narrations, the Imam just stops, very secretly just tells him to stop. And then the Imam just continues and walks on by. And the companion's like heartbroken. My Imam was right in front of me. I couldn't even go and say salam to him. Finally, afterwards, when there was a sort of secretive gathering, that companion was present. He asked him, what was happening over there? Why couldn't I come and see you in the street and say all this? He said, you don't know this, but I am constantly being watched. And they are also watching for who are the ones that are supporting me as well. If they find out who my supporters are, they will take them, they will jail them, they'll torture them, they'll kill them, families, all this. I don't want that to happen to you. This is bringing undue burden upon the Shias and upon my own family as well too. He said, so I order my Shias, do not even send salam if you see me out. Can you imagine being a Shia like that, walking by your Imam and being forbidden? It's haram for you to say salam to your Imam. For all intents and purposes, that's a ghaiba, isn't it? Even right now, we say, okay, the Imam is present, sun behind the clouds. We might say, he's present, but I wish I could talk to him. I wish I could feel his presence, something else. This sun behind the clouds thing is cool, but I don't know, I want something more. At least I could see him once, one salam, something. I mean, our situation is a lot different than the situations of the Muslims and the Shias back then, who saw the Imam. Some of them lived next to him, but they couldn't do anything. Not like the previous Imams, where they could sit next to them, get instructed, talk to them, ask their questions, write letters, all this stuff. These last four Imams barely had any access to their Shias, and by extension, the Shias barely had any access to them. So this last phase is what we're calling the ghaiba. Why? It's because the Imams had been instructing their Shias in the previous phase, and now they said, look, this ghaiba is a test stream. You were instructed what to do when we are not in front of you, when you can't send us letters, when you can't sit down and be instructed by us. Have you learned the principles from our forefathers? What will you do when we're not in front of you? Will you understand what to do with the Quran? Will you understand your duties with the poor, with orphans, with the enemies? Will you know what to do or not? So this was the examination phase for the Muslims or the Shias very specifically. What do we do? How do we act in the ghaiba? So this, in totality, this is what wilayah is. It's a full educational system that gives a sense of instruction, it gives education, and at the end, wilayah also continues because it doesn't stop. The Imams don't say, look, because you don't have us, we're done. No, we gave instructions to ulama, our wukala, our representatives. Did you follow them or not? We gave our methodology to certain individuals in Basra, in Kufa, in Sham, everywhere. If you had a question, you should have asked them. You didn't need to come to us directly. People always ask, taqleed, is this something that was just made up a couple hundred years ago? No. This is something that began at the time of the Ahlul Bayt. They had instructed people because they knew there's going to be a time where we will not have access to the Imams. So let us get you ready. Here are the instructions. Here's the tools and the methodologies. So you know how to prevent as much as you can, all the mistakes that all the other types of individuals will be making. So this system of wilayah built within it has this test of ghaiba. And this test exists for us right now too. So all of us who want to ask, how strong is my identity? How do I know if I'll be a supporter of my Imam when he returns or not? Well, the system's already been given. It's been established already. The same way that they were tested back then, we are being tested right now. All I have to do is ask myself, I've already been introduced to the system of wilayah and to the awliya. I know who the prophets, the Imams are, the Quran, I understand all this. The teachings and instructions, okay, generally I have some understanding about these things too, okay? And now in this ghaiba, I know that what the Imams did is they left behind representatives. Okay, well, what is my relationship with the representatives of my Imam? What is my relationship with ulama? Is it like, once in a while, if I really am really confused about something, I might, research online or, ask AI some fifth question. That's like the extent of my relationship? Do I have all these doubts about how is the system or the system of the ulama and say, look, these guys are off in some other country, they don't know what I'm dealing with over here in the West. How do they know? Right? The situation in Iraq and Iran, so it's different than over here. They don't know, this modern society is different over there. So how can they give me rulings that apply over here? Right? A lot of people have these kind of doubts and questions. So our relationship right now with ulama, scholars, maraja, is going to determine whether or not we're going to have a strong relationship with the Imam of the time. A lot of us think that the Imam of the time is going to return and magically I'm just going to become the best Shia. That's not how it works. It didn't work for the Muslims back then, it's not going to work for us now. Right? A simple principle to keep in mind, and then we'll move on. You and I are always worried about recognizing this capital I Imam. Right? How do I know who the Imam is going to be? Right? There's a bunch of fake Imams that might come, or people who claim that they're the Imam. Right? It happens, right? In Iraq and Iran, there are fake Imam Mahdis that come up all the time. We're always worried about this capital I Imam. We forget that we're tested through the lowercase I Imam. a random speaker or scholar or zakir, or somebody that claims to be speaking on behalf of Islam, am I well equipped enough that I can tell this person is trained or not, that this person is allowed to lead salah or not, that this person knows their ahkam, their taqwa level is according to the way that has been described by the Ahlul Bayt? Right? Those last four imams, one of the bulk subject matters in their riwayat is what? Here are the qualities of a proper alim. If you see them attached to dunya, if you see them attached to money, if you see them XYZ, that is ulama as-su. Don't go by people like that. These are evil ulama. They're going to try to dissuade you from our principles. They'll try to take you towards batil. They're agents of shaitan, not agents of Allah. Right? That's how they've been described. But again, that's a separate detailed discussion. And the final point of this is, and as we connect to the Messiah, this is not something that is just some theory that doesn't exist in reality. This same test existed within this episode of Karbala as well. The people at large knew exactly who Imam Hussein was. They had been instructed what they were supposed to do. And then what did they do? In turn, they said, by sending letters to the Imam from all around, but especially in places like Kufa, Basra, and other places, they said, okay, Imam, we are ready for you. We are inviting you to come to Kufa. We'll protect you. We'll fight alongside you. We want you to become our leader, as you rightfully deserve. So what does the Imam do? Does he just go run to Kufa right away? No, he says this system of wilayah demands a test, just like my brother had done, just like my father had done, just like my grandfather had done. This system is always going to be tested by a ghaiba. And that system of ghaiba is always tested through a not representative. And this is why in this episode, as we commemorate Muharram, when we think about the first shaheed, sometimes we start with the companions like Zuhair or Habib or Hud. But if we're thinking about Karbala in its full tragedy, the first shaheed of this episode is Muslim ibn Aqil. This Na'ib, the one who is there to test the people of Kufa. You think you can handle Imam Hussein? Well, let's see how you handle his Na'ib first. And we all know, unfortunately, what took place, where initially Muslim ibn Aqil, he's there, and it seems as though he has support. According to some numbers, thousands of people are lined up beside him, ready to storm the palace, fight, do all this. But unfortunately, because of that weakness of Iman, because of their attachment to the dunya, because of being in fear, for many other reasons, little by little, the tactics of Ibn Ziyad start to work against Muslim ibn Aqil. His numbers of thousands now go down to hundreds. That number of hundreds dwindles more and more and more. Until, according to some reports, when he's there in the masjid at night, as he leads this Isha prayer, that final prayer that he offered, he turns around and he sees that there's maybe 30 people. Then he says, fine, let's go out in the streets, let's go somewhere where we can be protected. As he goes together with these 30 odd some companions, little by little, secretly they begin to run away and sneak away from him. Until Muslim finally realizes, and he turns around and he realizes that there's nobody left. And he's all alone in the streets of Kufa. And this, we call Imam Hussein Gharib al-Ghuraba. We should remember as well that Muslim is describing himself. He is a Gharib in Kufa too. This is not his home. These are not his streets. These are not his alleys. He does not know his way around. He doesn't know where to go. He doesn't know who's a friendly face, who's an enemy, who's out for him. So now Muslim is left all alone. He's wondering what he should do. He's roaming the streets until he comes and he sits down, thinking about what he could do in a time like this, in the middle of the night. And they say as he's outside sitting on the steps of somebody's home, just maybe sighing or crying, wondering what to do, this kind old lady, Dora, comes outside and they have a short conversation. She wants to make sure that this is not an agent of Ibn Ziyad or this is not some criminal or somebody. And when he explains that I'm Muslim ibn Aqil, I was sent by my Imam, my Mawla, and I had supporters, but now they've abandoned me. I'm all alone in your city. All I ask for you is a cup of water. And as he drinks that water, then she realizes that I have to now support him. I'm a supporter of your Imam. I am one of the followers of Imam Hussein. Come to my house. You can stay with me. I'll try my best to protect you, but I have to warn you that my son-in-law, he's a vicious and disgusting man, and he wants to work and gain the favor of Ibn Ziyad. If he finds out that you are here, he will take you to Ibn Ziyad. And unfortunately, when the son-in-law returns, he figures out that Muslim ibn Aqil is there. He returns back with many soldiers. Muslim ibn Aqil tries his best and valiantly fights against these soldiers of Ibn Ziyad. He kills many of them. Then a fake agreement is made with one of the soldiers. He says, "You'll be unharmed. Just come with me for a conversation and a talk with Ibn Ziyad." They take him as a prisoner to the palace. Now the final conversation begins. Now he realizes that that promise that was made to him now is going to be broken. And Ibn Ziyad says, "No, you are going to be executed by me. But if you have any wishes, say them now." Now Muslim begins to give his final wasiyah. And he mentions a few points to Ibn Ziyad. He says, "First, I've had some debts that I've incurred while I'm over here. Pay those debts back for me." Ibn Ziyad agrees, "I'll pay those debts off." The second, he says, is I ask for a cup of water, or a small drink of water. And when that water is given to him, and he's getting ready to take a sip, whenever we think about how two individuals, how people can be close, friends, family members, we always think about their positive qualities being the same. That they always had good relationships and similar life experiences. But true people who are close to one another, they go through the same difficulties as their beloved loved ones. And you see how beloved Muslim ibn Aqil is. It's as if Allah knew that because he'll be apart and away from Imam Hussein, the same musibah, the same difficulty that Imam Hussein will face on Ashura, I'm going to give the same bala and masa'ib and musibah to Muslim ibn Aqil as well. So if Mawla Hussein is not allowed to have a sip of water on Ashura, then I will take away this ability of having water for Muslim ibn Aqil as well. When Muslim is given that cup of water and he tries to take a sip because his lip had a cut on it, a small drop of blood falls into this cup of water. Now he knows he cannot drink this. He asks for another cup. Another cup is brought to him. Another drop of blood falls in there. And perhaps maybe he recognized, maybe, who knows, maybe he knew that maybe my Mawla will be deprived of water, so how could I drink water when my Mawla will be deprived of water? Now, Muslim ibn Aqil gives his final request. He says, "My final request is that you allow me to send a message to my Imam, my Mawla Hussein, to tell him, do not come to Kufa because the people over here will betray you as they betrayed your brother, as they betrayed your father. Do not come to Kufa because all these individuals who claim that they loved and supported you, now their swords will be against you." And Ibn Ziyad rejects this. He says, "No, this is something I will not do. Your Imam, your Hussein will come here and we will take care of him ourselves." Now Muslim ibn Aqil is taken onto the rooftops. He begins to make his final 2 rakat salah. He begins offering his final adhkar. And one of the final dhikrs that he performs is sending his salams to his Mawla, because he knows he will not be able to see him. So he begins saying, "Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, assalamu alayka ya ibn Rasulullah." In the same way, in the final moments of every single Sahaba and companion and family member in Karbala on Ashura, the same way their final words were a salam to their Imam, Muslim ibn Aqil sends the final salam to his Imam as well.
अलविदा 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 ऐ दिलबरान जाफर तैयार अलविदा 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 तेरे लिए बच्चों से कहती थी बार-बार तेरे लिए बच्चों से कहती थी बार-बार तेरे लिए बच्चों से कहती थी बार-बार रंगों से दारोन मोहम्मद ये मानिसान ऐ दिलबरान जाफर तैयार अलविदा 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 दिलबरान जाफर तैयार अलविदा 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 का इफ्तिखार बराना जिहाद में जाफर का इफ्तिखार बढ़ाना जिहाद में जाफर का इफ्तिखार बढ़ाना जिहाद में नाना की अपनी शान दिखाना जिहाद में ऐ दिलबरान जाफर तैयार
الوداع 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 جعفر تیار الوداع 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 خدا کی بیٹی کے تم دونوں شیر ہو بیٹا میں جاؤ فتح میں اب کچھ نہ دیر ہو اے دلبران جعفر تیار الوداع 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 جعفر تیار الوداع 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 ہر بات اپنے دن سے سوا ہو تو بات ہے فوراً پڑے کہ حشر بپا ہو تو بات ہے اے دلبران جعفر تیار الوداع 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 جعفر تیار الوداع 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 رہے سپاہ مگر منہ نہ موڑنا حیدر کی یادگار ہو میدان چھوڑنا اے دلبران جعفر تیار الوداع 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 عمر کے سر جو اتارو تو خوش ہوں میں دشمن کو جھوم کمارو دشمن اے دلبران جعفر تیار الوداع 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 یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین اللهم صل علی
السلام علیکم یا رسول اللہ، السلام علیکم یا نبی اللہ، السلام علیکم یا امیر المؤمنین، السلام علیکم یا فاطمہ زہرا سیدۃ نساء العالمین، السلام علیکم یا حسن المجتبی، السلام علیکم یا سید الشہداء بکربلاء یا ابا عبداللہ، السلام علی الحسین وعلی علی بن الحسین وعلی اولاد الحسین وعلی اصحاب الحسین، السلام علیکم یا ائمۃ المعصومین علی بن الحسین محمد بن علی وجعفر بن محمد موسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي، السلام عليك يا حجة القائم بن حسن المهدي مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان، الأمان الأمان الأمان، عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك واجعلنا من خير أعوانه وأنصاره وشياعه والمستشهدين بين يديه، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Where's those dang ships, man?
Inshallah, brothers and sisters, there will be a small Q&A that will take place right now, so please take a seat and inshallah we can get a question asked. Inshallah tomorrow there will be no question, but right now you can just talk.
Should I turn the live stream? Live stream? Live stream?